Welcome back to the channel. My name's Brian Kingsbury. Today we're going to answer some frequently asked questions about Paul McCartney. Question number 1. How old was Paul McCartney when he joined the Beatles? It says here McCartney was 15 years old. He met Lennon on 6 July 1957 and joined as a rhythm guitarist shortly after. In February of 1958, McCartney invited his friend George Harrison, then aged 15, to watch the band. Another question many people ask is how many number one songs has Paul McCartney had? The answer, 24. It is worth pointing out that Paul McCartney has appeared on more number ones than any other artist under a diverse range of credits. He has in fact appeared on 24 number ones. People sometimes wonder, is Paul McCartney left-handed? In fact, Paul McCartney wasn't the only lefty in the Beatles, but he is left-handed. Drummer Ringo Starr is also left-handed, although he plays a right-handed kit. This adaptation helped define his unique and legendary playing style. People sometimes wonder about Paul McCartney as a child, and they ask, what did Paul McCartney do as a child? It says here, James Paul McCartney was born in Liverpool on June 18, 1942, the son of Mary and James McCartney. His mother was a midwife. His father, a volunteer fireman during World War II, was an accomplished jazz musician. Young Paul taught himself the trumpet and soon later the guitar. Of course, once you become rich and famous, people always wonder about your money. And people ask, is Paul McCartney a billionaire? Well, it says here, Paul McCartney is now a billionaire, the first British musician to do it, and the former Beatle can thank Beyonce. Paul McCartney might not care too much for money, but he's got plenty of it. So of course, when you become rich and famous, people are drawn to your personality, and they ask, what is Paul McCartney's personality type? It says here, Paul McCartney is likely an ESFJ personality type, known as a provider. Of the 16 personality types, ESFJs are energized by time with others. So when the Beatles broke up, people were devastated, but they often ask who left the Beatles first. Turns out Ringo Starr was the first to quit the band. The drummer was so fed up with his position within the Beatles during the recording of the White Album in August of 1968 that he walked out of Abbey Road for 2 weeks. People are often curious about Paul McCartney's love life. They ask, who did Paul McCartney love the most? It says here, Paul McCartney loved Linda McCartney the most. It says here, she was his longest lasting love. In 1967, McCartney first met Linda Eastman, a photographer, at a Georgia Fame concert in London. They then crossed paths a few times in London and New York City, and in 1968, following McCartney's breakup with Asher, they became a couple. So this might seem like a trivial fact, but people know Paul McCartney as an animal lover, and they ask, what is Paul McCartney's favorite animal? Any guesses? In fact, Paul revealed in June that his favorite animal is a horse, which makes sense when you consider all the photos and videos of him riding horses over the years. So everybody knows Paul McCartney had many hits over the years, but what is Paul McCartney's most successful song? His most successful song is Silly Love Songs in 1976. Written as a response to the notion that he could only write silly love songs, McCartney took what his critics had said and turned it into a number one charting pop hit. In fact, Silly Love Songs became the top song on the Billboard Hot 100 chart for the year 1976. When you consider this next fact, Christmas might be Paul McCartney's favorite time of year. It says here, how many Christmas number ones has Paul McCartney had? Turns out he's been number one on the charts 8 times. It says here, Paul McCartney has been top 8 times with various acts, 4 as the Beatles and 1 as Wings, Band Aid, Band Aid 20, and the Justice Collective. Cliff Richard has spent 4 Christmases at number 1, 2 as a solo act, 1 with the Shadows, and 1 as part of Band Aid 2. So we just talked about McCartney's love for horses, and he loves all animals, but is Paul McCartney a vegan? Answer is yes. Says here, Paul and Linda McCartney's decision to go meat-free came about in 1975 as they watched lambs playing outside their farm window while sat eating lamb chops. The family has been veggie ever since, and each of them has contributed to vegetarianism in their own way. So we talked about McCartney's billionaire status, but people wonder, who is the richest singer? These artists have amassed staggering fortunes through their talent, business acumen, and strategic investments. Looks like at number 1 is Rihanna with a net worth of $1.7 billion. Rihanna tops the list as the richest singer. At number 2, Madonna. Known as the Queen of Pop, Madonna's net worth is estimated at $850 million. At number 3, Beyonce. Finally, at number 4 is Sir Paul McCartney, followed closely by Celine Dion at number 5. So of course we all know Paul McCartney can play the guitar, but many ask, how many instruments can Paul McCartney play? He progressed as a lead vocalist and multi-instrumentalist as well as a singer-songwriter. In addition to singing and songwriting, Paul McCartney played bass guitar, acoustic and electric guitars, piano, and keyboards, as well as over 40 other musical instruments. So of course, when you're a big rock star like Paul McCartney, you tend to get into a little trouble. People ask, how long was Paul McCartney jailed? Turns out he was jailed for 9 days. On January 16th, 1980, one of the most iconic figures in music history, Sir Paul McCartney found himself on the wrong side of the law in Tokyo, Japan. The former Beatle was arrested for marijuana possession, a charge that led to a 9-day stint in a Japanese jail. When people hear that Paul McCartney is a billionaire, they ask, why is McCartney a billionaire? Aside from making money from his albums and performances, McCartney owns a company called MPL Communications, which he founded in 1969. The music publishing company controls the rights to more than 25,000 songs, according to a 2019 report from Billboard. So we've heard about Paul McCartney's love for animals, but people ask, did McCartney have a dog? It says here Paul McCartney had a sheepdog named Martha, which inspired the song Martha, My Dear, and he also had a cat named Thisbe, named after a Midsummer Night's Dream. So we talked about Paul and Linda McCartney, but people ask, what song did Paul McCartney write for his wife? Turns out the name of that song is The Lovely Linda. It's a song by English musician Paul McCartney, released as the opening track of his debut solo album, McCartney, in April of 1970. McCartney wrote the song to his first wife, Linda McCartney. So earlier we heard that Ringo was the first to leave the Beatles, but people ask, what year did Paul leave the Beatles? The answer to that, on 10 of April 1970, McCartney said in a press release that he was no longer working with the group, which sparked a widespread media reaction and worsened the tensions between him and his bandmates. Legal disputes continued long after his announcement, and dissolution was not formalized until 29 December 1974. Of course, we know about Paul McCartney's hits with the Beatles, but how many hits total did Paul McCartney write? Says here McCartney had 32 number one songs on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. What is Paul McCartney's best-selling album? Paul McCartney's best-selling album is Band on the Run, which was released in 1973. It has sold more than 5 million copies in the United States alone, is one of the best-selling albums of all time. So with all this new knowledge about Paul McCartney, some people believe that Paul McCartney is not even really Paul McCartney. What do I mean? Paul McCartney has won the Grammy Award for Lifetime Achievement Award both as a solo artist and part of the Beatles. Before becoming a musician, McCartney was an electrician. Some conspiracy theorists claim that McCartney was killed in an accident in 1966 and that a look-alike has been pretending to be him ever since. So there you have it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed answering some questions about Sir Paul McCartney, one of the Beatles, a legend of the name. And if you like this type of content, you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'm currently sitting at 985 subscribers. We have 4.1 thousand videos up on the channel, so there's plenty for you to watch. Go ahead and hit that subscription button and ring that notification bell. That way you'll be notified every time one of these videos drop. Thanks again for watching this one to the very end. I'm Brian Kingsbury. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.